So I've scheduled this for 9:20, but I wonder what happens if I hit go live before then. Does it matter? Does it not officially start? Or is the start time just a suggestion? It's given me that error, not enough video. That must be something with our upload speeds. I've seen that a few times, but usually it goes away. And if you're watching the recording, it might be skipping or slowing the video, but hopefully the audio's fine. Anyway, this is going to be short. Remember, the plan is this quarter I'm going to do one live video for each class each week. And so it's not a huge event. It's not like going over a test or anything. It's just checking in, making sure that the people at home can follow along and ask questions, or hopefully watch these live. If not, watch them later. That's fine. I'll make a post on Google Classroom. So, quick announcement, and then I'll get to the assignment. I posted this last week, but it's all stuff we need to know. So, standardized testing, which is this Thursday. If you're a sophomore, you're probably doing the PSAT. If you're a junior, you're probably doing the ASVAB. And yeah, there are exceptions, but that's the general thing. And if you're a freshman or senior, you're probably not here on that day. So no normal class. You'll either be testing or gone or whatever, and we'll have a big spreadsheet saying who goes to what room. And I have a room where I proctor one of those tests, and everybody will have whatever their assignment is. Probably, there's a certain point where we finish, and maybe by 12 or 1 you're back in class, but we're not planning to post new stuff then. It'll just be time to work. Also, November 3rd, parent-teacher conferences, but they're not here, and they're not even locked in for that day. I'll probably do some November 2nd and some November 1st, just to try to spread them out. You might hear from different teachers who want to schedule a conference through a phone call or through a Google Meet or Zoom or whatever they decide to do. And then finally, this is what we're doing right now, so you don't need an announcement about that. I'm going to post a new assignment today, but let's look at the one from last time. Hey, I got 2 turned in. I'll grade those pretty soon, which, by the way, I still haven't graded all the e-learning, but I'll do that too. Maybe I'll have time. It's extra. Yeah, that's the way it is in every class. They might count it differently, like assessment versus assignment or different amounts, but it's always extra, which I'll grade those pretty soon. For a lot of you guys, you'll get, even if you don't get the full credit, you'll still get a good chunk of credit, and that'll help. It'll look weird, like, some people might have like 300% or something, but it'll all even out by the end of the quarter. They'll be kind of normal looking grades. Anyway, our project this quarter, first of all, we got the reading scary story thing. If you haven't done that, make sure you do. But our new thing is this idea of nonlinear stories. So stories that don't just follow one character in one timeline in order the whole way. For example, they might flash forward or flash back or jump to another place or jump to another point of view. This is pretty common in no matter what kind of medium. If you're doing a book or a movie or a show or a game, they always have some version of this, even if it's very small. So your plan this quarter is to write one of those. You can either take your story from last quarter and redo it, rearrange it, adjust it, add stuff, whatever. or start a new one. And either one's okay with me as long as you end up with a story that fits the criteria. So I'm going to review the assignment from last time, and then I'm going to talk about today's part of it. So I used the example of the movie The Blind Side, which has sort of the simplest version of this. The simplest type of nonlinear story is you start off with a scene at the beginning and then flashback to sort of the lead up to that moment. You know, it's like that meme from a couple of years ago that's like, you know, record scratch, bet you're wondering how I got here or something. That is the simplest form. If you ever read basically any book from the 1800s, they all do that. They start off with the narrator saying, oh, let me tell you how this happened. Let me tell you how, you know, H.G. Wells is like, let me tell you how I did the time machine. Or if you read Frankenstein, it's like, oh, let me tell you about this guy named Frankenstein. They all, I mean, pretty much any novel will do that at least a little bit. Even at the early 1900s, The Catcher in the Rye does that, and it's a pretty common thing. You usually, by the end, you catch up to where you are and then go a little bit further, but there are different possibilities. Obviously, the character doesn't die in the middle because we know they survived to tell the tale, but the narrator doesn't have to be the hero. You know, the narrator can be like the sidekick or something like Watson in the Sherlock Holmes stories. But anyway, that's not the only way to do it. You can have something like this story I gave you guys called The Rule of Names, which is a fantasy story. And in that one, you start with one character, and then another guy shows up, and he says, let me tell you what I know. And so you learn something from him. Spoiler, it turns out that the original character knew it as well, but you don't know that. And this is one of the things that you can do with nonlinear stories, which is to control the information. Okay, so maybe you want your audience to know just the right stuff at the right time. For example, maybe you want them to learn something at the same time the character does. This is true in most mystery stories, detective stories, sort of quest type stories where your guy is going into a new place and learning new things, and you want the audience to learn it at the same time. Because if they knew the whole twist early on, then it's kind of boring to watch the character who doesn't. Maybe there's a moment where they find the letter or the artifact, and then you have a flashback and sort of summarize what they're learning. That's a classic way to do it. But sometimes you don't like that. Sometimes you want the audience to know more. Okay, maybe it's a tragedy, and we want to feel suspense when the character's walking into a trap or they're walking into something that is going to be bad. For example, any type of old tragedy, like a classic play, might do that. Oedipus the King, or Oedipus Rex, is a Greek play, and the hero at the beginning doesn't know what's wrong, and he eventually finds out what's wrong. But most of the time, the audience knows more than he does, because we have narrators, and we have this group of characters called the chorus who will tell us what's the deal. So when we know more than he does, it makes it more tragic, because we're sort of just getting that sinking feeling of like, oh no, he's going to find out, he's going to see the problem, he's going to react to how bad it is, and that's different from us learning it at the same time. Because if that was the case, well, maybe it'd be boring, or maybe it'd be less emotional. So that's another possibility. You could do the framing device where we start in the beginning and flashback and go from there. You could do something where you change the level of information, where the audience knows more or less or the same as the main character. And then the third example, the last kind of main category of these type of nonlinear stories, is sometimes you just want to pick where the beginning is to just make it appropriate, or sometimes you just want to pick where the end is to make it appropriate. So, for example, the rule of names. It has a very slow beginning. If you read that story, it's about a guy walking to get his groceries. And he learns, or he doesn't learn, but we learn the rules, the geography, as he goes and says hi to people and watches what's going on in the town. We get to pick up, it's almost like a training mode for us. It's like, okay, here you can see how it works, who's who, get some exposition. And the reason the author did that is because we need to know that stuff. If you started in the beginning, chronologically, we wouldn't know, like, oh, why are they doing this? Where are they? What kind of magic do they have in this universe? And we'd be lost. So sometimes you just pick, okay, there's a slow part in the middle here. I'm going to start there because we need it. Other times you might pick what you want the end to be, and it doesn't have to be the last thing that happens. So, for example, I think I used this last time, but it's a good one, is the movie Pulp Fiction. That movie starts in the diner where these people are going to rob the diner, and then it jumps all around to different places, and then it ends in the diner again where we see how that turned out, and we see that some of our other main characters were there and they had to fight against the robbers. But that part that is the last scene is not the last thing that happens. It's kind of in the middle, actually. So what that does is it gives us a nice hopeful ending, because the two guys, Samuel Jackson and John Travolta, they end up kind of successful, and they stop the robbery and they walk out and they're feeling good. So it ends with a nice hopeful emotion, whereas, spoiler, one of those guys dies later in the story. So if it went chronologically and we saw what happened one after the other, then one of those guys would die and it would end up with a different feeling. So sometimes you pick the beginning or the end to just be what it has to be, and then you rearrange everything else around it. So anyway, those are some examples. I wanted to show the types of things you can do. So I gave 3. There are more, of course, but I gave 3 core ones, which is the framing device, the information, and the sometimes you just have to pick whatever the beginning or the end have to be. Now, your assignment today, I'm going to post this on Classroom, is to write a short plan. You're going to say, I'm going to do this because X, Y, and Z. So you might say, I'm going to take my quarter 1 story and rearrange it because I want the ending to be this part, or because I need to control what information the audience gets, or because I'd like to add this framing device of the narrator talking about it from the future. By the way, this happened a lot in these stories we did for the project. Let's see, The Last Rung on the Ladder by Stephen King. It has one of the characters narrating as an adult, and he's looking back on the kids, which is interesting because they're doing something super dangerous. So you know that guy lives. You don't know about the other character, and it turns out that something unexpected happens, but it really manages the expectations and the possibilities. If we saw these 2 kids in the store, they're climbing a super tall ladder. If we saw them without that, we might think that either one of them could die, but we know one survives because he tells the story as the narrator. Same thing with a lot of these, actually. and that really sort of changes things. The Jaunt, here's another Stephen King one. That one is not like that, and that one is a third-person narrator, so we don't know. Any of them could die or go to another dimension or go crazy, and in fact that does happen to somebody, and we wouldn't know. So anyway, that's your assignment, is to write a plan. I'm going to take my story from quarter 1 and use one of these because X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to write a different story and use one of these because X, Y, and Z. So I will post that. You can do this one if you haven't yet, or do the new one, or finish this thing if you haven't yet. So any of those, and that's it, by the way, for the quarter. I'm not adding new stuff. I'll add new steps. Like each day I'll say, okay, here's the next part, but that's the stuff. The big grades in quarter 2 are going to be this part, the reading project, and then the nonlinear story. So we won't start another thing in November. It's just continuing this, finishing a draft, doing a little edit, doing a little publish at the end, and that's the quarter. So I believe we have 15 days of in-school normal days and then 11 days of e-learning, which is a good amount, but in some ways it's only half of that because half the days are A and half are B, so we can't really wait until the end. By the way, I would like to get these done and get these graded before the very end. I don't want to have to scramble on the last day and be in a rush. So that's it. I'm going to stop it now. This is already long enough, and I'll post this stuff on Google Classroom.